Way back in the spring of 1990, 10-year-old me was given a $5 allowance. In search of something to spend my money on, I came upon something fantastic at my local convenience store newsstand. It was then that I started a lifelong obsession with the gold standard of sequential art, the comic book. Now, as an old man, I have decided to open up some old boxes and dig into my comic book collection. I decided it's time for me to review and analyze the illustrations and artists that made me comics crazy. Hey everyone, this is Chris Crazy House, and I'd like to welcome you all to another episode of Comics Crazy. And today, we're going to be looking at Spider-Man number 22 from 1992, and this is part 5 of the Revenge of the Sinister Six. So this is the famous cover, folks. This is the one that the Revenge of the Sinister Six is known for, the 5th part, and I think it's because Eric Larson did that very famous cover of the Battle Royale in The Return of the Sinister Six, where Spider-Man is by himself and he's fighting all 6 members of the Sinister Six. He wanted to do something special for number 5 of this story, and this is the cover that became famous for it. And you got Spider-Man on this cover out front, and in the background behind him, you got the Hulk, this new character from the 90s called the Sleepwalker, and you got the Ghost Rider. And you see that they're running into battle with the Sinister Six. We see pumpkin bombs, so we know that that's coming from the Hobgoblin. We see Dr. Octopus's arms and tentacles kind of spread out throughout the page, and we also see electrical bolts. So we know that Electro's over there. So we got our heroes in this issue running right at you on the cover, running at the bad guys. And once again, this was a very popular cover from back then. This is one of those quintessential covers that I think of when I think of like the height of the comic book industry in the 90s. And you can even see it here in this collected version that I have of the Revenge of the Sinister Six. There's 2 different versions of that cover. You got, this is like the newer painted version, and this is the classic version. Okay, you can see them side by side, so you get a good look at both versions of this cover. And you know, this one, the background is a little bit darker, and I guess it looks like a little bit more ominous as these heroes are kind of jumping into action. But I'm still more of a fan of the classic one with that bluish background, because I remember seeing this cover when I had to be around maybe 11 or 12 years old at the time. And I very much remember going to the comic book store and I saw this on the shelf and I remember staring at this cover for the longest time. And while this is one of the few times where I never tried to imitate this cover, at this point I was drawing my own characters, but I used this as a good guide as how to draw comic book characters. I use this as a guide as far as like the foreshortening of the Hulk here. You see how his hands kind of coming forward and his body's kind of more back. Just drawing in a perspective, because this has a good perspective on it. As far as these characters going, you follow the lines. They're all kind of going down like this, right? And they kind of taper down a little bit, get more horizontal as they go in. So a lot of the characters are following those lines as well. If you look at Ghost Rider's motorcycle, you can follow some of those lines going in that perspective. You know, the pose that Spider-Man is doing here, I made sure that I studied that as far as doing characters in these crazy type poses, where there's foreshortening going on here as well, where his arm is kind of coming forward and you can follow his web line as well as his foot kind of coming out forward. So there's a lot going on here in this cover that excites you and gets you hyped to want to pick up this book, buy it, and read the adventure that you're going to see on the inside. So I very much appreciate this cover, and this is one of those, like I said, one of those covers that really takes me back, and my mind often thinks of it when I think of classic comic book covers from this era. So let's break open this issue and take a look at the story as we are jumping right into it. And we got an opening splash page here of Dr. Octopus kind of looking over his troops and asking them and saying to them, let's see what you got. He wants to test out all their new weapons and whatnot. And, you know, this opening splash page is not the greatest. It's a good and decent enough drawing of Dr. Octopus, but in my opinion, as far as, you know, adding some extra drama to the story, is not the best of the opening splash pages that we've seen so far. But there are some really good things that we'll see in this story. I think the panel work is good in this book, as well as some great splash pages that we will see very soon. And we see here that the Vulture is actually starting to become suspicious of Dr. Octopus, saying that, you know what, I signed on for this because I thought we were partners and taking over the world together. I'm not your lackey. I'm not your boy. I'm not just a henchman on the side, okay? And that's, the Vulture is getting worried now that Dr. Octopus is seeing himself as the kingpin here, and the rest of the Sinister Six are just the henchmen of this scheme. And when he does so, we see Electro jump in saying, like, you know, don't worry about a Vulture. Ock's on our side. He's like, we stole these weapons, but we got to test them out first. Don't worry about it. And that's when the Vulture starts becoming suspicious of Electro, saying that you and Dr. Octopus have got real buddy-buddy all of a sudden. Now, all of a sudden, before you wanted to kill him, but now you're acting like he's your boy, you know? And, you know, this is where we see that Electro is actually starting to get a little nervous here, because we know that it was him that brought the Sinister Six back together and told them that they were going to kill Dr. Octopus. But what it really was Dr. Octopus called him in to get those guys together so he can enact his new plan. So we see that there is some dissension in the ranks. And as we switch from the Sinister Six over to what's going on with Peter Parker, we all know from the last issue that he passed out in the bathroom after having a rumble with the Sinister Six. And, you know, he lost track of his buddy Deathlock, but he got home, but he was all beat up and needed some help. So he realizes that he's in his bed, he's been sleeping for a while, and how tired he is after all the adventures he's had trying to stop the Sinister Six. We cut back to the story here, and we see that Vulture is still very mistrustful of not just Dr. Octopus and Electro, but all of his comrades here. And we see that Mysterio is trying to persuade him to go ahead and work with the rest of the group. And I really like this page. I really like the way that this is done. Because, you know, when I told you before in the last issue where we got that very large exposition dump, that was done in kind of a boring way. But this actually, you know, tells a story in a good way. You see where we got this really cool like panel that takes up most of the page, and even that is breaking over the borders here where we see the Vulture holding his gun, and we see Sandman in the background. You know, the Sandman we know has been turned into glass by Dr. Octopus, and even Vulture's asking, like, how do we know that Dr. Octopus is not going to do the same thing for us? He turned on Sandman, why wouldn't he do it to us? And we see a very good panel structure, storytelling of Mysterio first trying to use his powers on the Vulture, and the Vulture kind of begrudgingly, you know, going along with them, but he's saying he doesn't want Mysterio using any of his little tricks. And Mysterio is thinking here to himself, like, you know what? The Vulture's right to be suspicious of being betrayed, because I plan on betraying all of you at some point. So once again, I've told you about these characters in the Sinister Six. None of them are really trustworthy. Their alliance is very loose, and usually this is why they fail, is because they all plan on double-crossing each other at some point. And before we continue on with the story, we got a great ad here for the X-Men trading cards that came out in the early 90s. They're all drawn by Jim Lee, and I loved those trading cards back then. I don't have many of them now because I remember trading them with my friends at the time, and I never got the whole set. So, I mentioned this just, offhand to my wife one day, and for one of my birthdays, my wife and my daughter got me this. And it's kind of like this little illustrated book that showcases all of those cards from the X-Men trading card set. And you get like some notes here from Jim Lee himself about the design and also the colorist, where they talk about just the design and what they were doing with those trading cards and how they made them. So very fun little present that I got from my family. And it's also a book that I cherish that's in my collection now because they know how much I love these classic comic books. So they got this for me. So I appreciate that. So we turn back here to Peter Parker and his personal life. And, he's recovering from being beat down by the Sinister Six. And we see his wife, Mary Jane, as being the very dutiful wife by re-sewing his Spider-Man costume. So she's patching it up for him after it's been ripped up and torn up, and she says she really doesn't want him going back to that black suit again because she thinks it's awful. She wants to make sure that he sticks with the classic red and blue Spider-Man costume. And he's kind of giving her some, little tips and reminders to make sure the eye holes and everything is big enough so that she doesn't mess up his mask and he can see properly with his spider costume. Cutting back to New Jersey, where things are getting crazy with the Sinister Six testing out their new weapons. And we got this really cool panel of the Hobgoblin testing out his fire cannons, where he's literally shooting hellfire at these robotic drones that they're training with. So this version of the Hobgoblin, I told you before, he's actually a demon, but something has happened to his mind where he thinks that he's actually an angel and he's fighting demons. So that's why he's fighting so hard, because he actually thinks he's one of God's chosen angels and he's fighting against the demons out there. But what he really doesn't realize is that he's doing evil when he's doing this. He's been tricked by real demons in hell to think that he's doing something good. And we remark here with, Dr. Octopus saying that, yeah, this Hobgoblin is kind of crazy, but he's very easy to manipulate. And as long as we do that, he'll be a good soldier for our team. And this is where we first get a mention that the Sinister Six is going to have a new member. And Hobgoblin's asking, why doesn't our new member have to train with the rest of us? But Dr. Octopus kind of wants to save him as a surprise in case any heroes show up. So we know that in order for it to be a Sinister Six, we got to have a sixth member, and we're going to be introduced to that character at the end of this issue. So we sit here and, like I said, back to Spider-Man and Mary Jane, and he's getting shaved up and getting himself ready to go back out there and do battle with the Sinister Six. And, they have a little bit of an argument here about Peter being a little bit more old-fashioned and Mary Jane being, hip and with the new stuff. Mary Jane has always been kind of the hip girl. She's always been the one that's, pro popularity. And Peter has never been that type. Never, ever in his entirety of his life has he ever been the popular guy. And I've always liked that about his character. And I think that's what's very interesting about their relationship. The fact that they got together when initially you would think that they wouldn't have a lot in common. Okay. But, as they're talking about that, that's when she mentions that she got the part in the new Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. So Peter is worried now because he knows that this movie involves nude scenes and people are going to be able to see all of his wife's goodies on the big screen. Cutting back to the Sinister Six, and we see that they're all decked out looking like an army, and they got all their weaponry, their guns, bombs, and everything else. And they also got some robotic drones that they're going to use. And their new mission is to go and jack Hydra. That's right, the classic terrorist organization run by the Red Skull. The Sinister Six is going to jack them right now for their satellites because Dr. Octopus wants to use all of their space weaponry for his own base ends. And before they leave, Hobgoblin asks, what are we going to do about Sandman? You know, he's been turned into a glass statue. What you going to do with him, Dr. Octopus? And Octopus coldly says, oh yeah, the glass statue. This is what I'm going to do about it. And basically he breaks Sandman into millions of pieces. So our boy Sandman is looking like he has met his end at the hands of Dr. Octopus, where he was turned from sand to glass, and now he's been shattered completely into pieces all over the floor. Cutting back to Mary Jane and Spider-Man drama, where he's asking her, you know, you got the part, are you going to accept? She says yes, and this is where Peter freaks out because he's worried that now everyone is going to see Mary Jane in her birthday suit and find out if the carpet matches the drapes, and he doesn't want that to happen. He's scared that not only his friends, but his family and his co-workers are all going to see his wife and all of her glory on the big screen, and he doesn't want that to happen. And she's basically saying, like, you know, he needs to calm down and he needs to be supportive and he's, you know, needs to get with the times, but Peter is not really having it. He's not really going for a lot of her female tricks when it comes to this sort of thing. She's thinking being butt naked in the movie and busting it open is going to help her career somehow, but Peter knows the truth of it, that really is going to be an embarrassment. He's saying that she's a better actress than that. She doesn't have to show her goods in order to make it in this industry. Cut from that family drama to our boy Solo, the technologically advanced vigilante, the great value Punisher knockoff that we all know and love, as he's healing from getting shot up by Cyborg X, and he's taking himself a little Irish Spring bath here where he's got a healing up from his gun wounds, and he's found out too that the Sinister Six are actually still alive. He didn't kill them all with his Uzis like he thought when he did that drive-by on them. So he's saying he's got to make sure he gets back out there, and this time he's going to do the job right. Now, I don't know if he is convinced that he won't be tricked again by Mysterio and his illusion powers, but, you know, he seems pretty confident that he can get in there and do some damage with his arsenal of guns and teleportation. So we got back to the family drama, and Spider-Man and his wife have kind of calmed down. He's putting on his costume because he knows he has to go to work as a superhero. And you can see Mary Jane still has a little bit of anger on her face. You know, she's not, as women do sometimes, they might calm down, but they don't forget. She's still a little upset, and she still wants to have some more debate about this, but she still loves her husband and wants him to be careful here. And we find out that the Sinister Six is raiding that building in Manhattan, and that we know that that's really a secret Hydra base, and that's what they're doing there. They're going to jack Hydra. But, you know, Spider-Man, he tries calling some help from the Avengers and the Fantastic Four, but no one seems to be answering the phone. Now, these guys should be able to see this incident because it's on TV. So Spider-Man figures somebody will see it, and maybe I'll see some people there that can help. But for right now, I got to get out there and take responsibility for these bad guys. So, you know, very decent panel work as far as this argument goes. I really like this one. This page was my favorite as far as showcasing the argument between Peter Parker and Mary Jane, because I like the way the facial expressions look. They're subtle, but very well done. I actually like the way this panel looks here, where they're in the foreground and you can see like the silhouette or the shadow of their window. But I love the facial expressions here. You know, Peter Parker getting frustrated, Mary Jane kind of looking at him getting angry and, you know, upset that he would be so upset about her posing nude in this movie. So very well done with the facial expressions here. Remember that When you're designing your own comic and you have some people arguing back and forth, make sure there's some drama added to their facial features and, you know, the way they look. Don't just have them standing there with the stone face. Add some drama to your characters. Even if they're just having an argument, you can still make it interesting with the way you illustrate it. So we see our boy Deathblock has been found. We know that he fell down like an elevator shaft or something like that, and he was kind of put out of commission from the fall. And we see that he's, you know, still trying to boot himself up. His computer is talking to him inside of his mind and is saying that, you know, his systems are down, but they should be repaired in a few minutes, while he's kind of sitting there and recharging. So we know he'll probably find his way back into our story at some point. So here's what I was talking about with this book, where we got some really good splash pages. Now, like I said, that first page was not all that great. It was kind of generic with just Dr. Octopus standing there. But we got a really good double splash page in the middle of this book here, where the Sinister Six is taking out members of Hydra. And I really like this splash page. This is one of my favorite splash pages from this era, in fact. You know, let's take a look at it here in the collected edition, where the pages are a little bit more glossy and those colors pop out a little bit more. But, you know, what's great about this splash page is, you know, it's a double splash page and it kind of flows really good. It's almost kind of like, how you want to say, like in like a V shape. Everything kind of comes from this corner here. You know, you got the Hobgoblin acting as like the anchor for this corner, and he's shooting his guns, and, you know, the border goes across the top with the firing of this weapon here, and then it comes down right here as well. And that's kind of like acting as like the first little border you got here of the splash page. And from there, we got, you know, the Vulture shooting his guns and Dr. Octopus shooting his guns, but also using his arms. And this almost acts as a plane or a panel in and of itself as well. So you almost got like panels within panels, where Dr. Octopus is blocking here with his arms and creating another panel system of Electro in the background, shooting his electrical cannons at the members of Hydra. And we got characters like Mysterio over here firing his gun at some Hydra members. So once again, very well done when it comes to splash page work. And I just enjoy the action of it. It's very dynamic, not boring at all. It's rare that you get stuff like this in a lot of comic books nowadays. Like, I just think, you know, a lot of artists are not sure of how to create action and animation like this. Like, you know, creating something that is interesting and fun to look at. They want to be too close to reality, and they lose a lot of the fun that is supposed to exist within comic books. But at this time, Erik Larsen very much understood what he was trying to create here as far as coming up with a fun and colorful action page. So now we are outside that Hydra facility, and we see that our hero Spider-Man has met up with some other heroes. There are some other heroes there who are wanting to stop the Sinister Six. Once again, we got some really great panel work done here by Erik Larsen, where you see Spider-Man kind of coming down and joining the rest of the heroes, but he almost acts as a border to this panel. And as we go down, our eye follows, and we see the characters of the Sleepwalker, the Hulk, and Ghost Rider waiting out there in order to make a blitz on the Sinister Six. And Spider-Man kind of mentions that, you know, if Wolverine was here, this could be a great reunion of the new Fantastic Four, which was done by Art Adams in the Fantastic Four books, where it was a team up of Spider-Man, Ghost Rider, the Hulk, and Wolverine as the new Fantastic Four. I will definitely be reviewing those issues of Fantastic Four at some point, but I haven't scheduled it as of yet. But that's definitely something I want to talk about from this era of comics. But let's focus on this story at hand, where our heroes here have decided to go jump in and take down the Sinister Six. And it starts off with the Hulk punching through the wall. We just see his arm kind of coming through. And we see that we got that jagged panel work by Erik Larsen here again, where anytime there's like a really big action or destruction or maybe some vibration going on being caused by the Hulk punching through the wall, it's kind of caused the border to become very jagged. And I like the way that that's done. And we got our heroes jumping in there, ready to fight the bad guys. The Hulk out front, Spider-Man, Ghost Rider, and the Sleepwalker. So really cool panel here. This one I did try my best to do my own version of. I tried my best to learn, you know, just the way that the Hulk is drawn. I copied this pose, and I also copied this pose from the Sleepwalker with someone holding their arm out forward while they're flying. So I learned a lot as far as posing and foreshortening in bodies when it came to this panel in particular. So we turn over to this page and we see the Sleepwalker in action. And he was one of the newer characters from the 90s. I actually do have his first issue. And I remember getting it thinking like, you know, this is going to be worth some money someday because it's the first issue and the introduction of a new character. And this character is going to go on to the future and it's going to be valuable. Not really. It's rare that we even see this character anymore if he's still alive at all. But he was like an alien that was trapped in the mind of a human character. So every time that human character would sleep, the Sleepwalker would come out and dispense justice. So he tries to do that here, but winds up getting blasted by Electro. And we see him kind of getting blown forward into the camera here as he's coming at us, as he's getting zapped. And once again, not a bad character per se, but not the greatest either. Like, it seems like Erik Larsen just kind of threw him in there because he was new at the time. So we got to have him at some point. Focus here on a more popular character of the Hulk taking on Dr. Octopus. And I really enjoy how this body is drawn of the Hulk. And he tries to jump Dr. Octopus, but Octopus has a giant cannon that he fires at the Hulk point blank. So basically he shoots the Hulk in the face with a cannon and blows him back. But the force of it is so great that it even blows Dr. Octopus off his feet a little bit. On to the next page, we see our hero Spider-Man, and he's actually using that cybernetic cast to block bullets, which is actually smart. You know, if that cast can take a lot of damage, why not make use of it in this way? So he's basically using it almost as a shield from the Sinister Six, who are firing guns at him at the same time. And we see here that the Ghost Rider, who has beef with the Hobgoblin, has decided to hook one of his big metal chains to the Goblin's cannon and punch the Goblin into the face. Now, I remember when I first saw this panel, I kind of got the idea that it was just Ghost Rider pulling himself and punching the Hobgoblin in the face, but it almost looks like he punches the Hobgoblin and the Hobgoblin's head explodes. And it's funny because like the Ghost Rider has like all these spikes on his hands and around his wrist. So I was almost wondering, am I watching like an ultra violent anime or something like that? And did we just witness the death of the Hobgoblin? But really it's just a punch. And it's just showing how powerful the punch is. But it's funny in the way that I thought it was at first. That I thought we just witnessed the Ghost Rider murder the Hobgoblin right here in front of us. So on these pages is where the tide starts to turn a little bit and our heroes actually start losing at this point. And we're kind of building towards that cliffhanger for the next and final issue of The Revenge of the Sinister Six. It starts out with Ghost Rider getting double-fisted here by this robotic drone that Dr. Octopus has employed to help him with the taking over the world here. And we see Sleepwalker with the Hulk as they're running into action, and then all of a sudden, the Sleepwalker starts fading away. And once again, I explained to you that the Sleepwalker, whenever his human counterpart is awake, that's when he disappears. And he said he tried to catch a nap to fight the Sinister Six, but someone woke him up by knocking on his door. So he has now disappeared. I think that's kind of a weird thing for a character to be, where every time the secret identity is awake, our hero disappears. That could be a problem, and it's a problem here because now they just lost one of their allies. And we look here that one of these robotic drones has blown the cybernetic cast off of Spider-Man. So now his arm is exposed and he's worried about getting hurt. And as Ghost Rider and the Hulk try to advance on Dr. Octopus, that's when Doc Ock calls in the sixth member of the Sinister Six. And we see a giant arm break in through the ceiling and crush the Hulk and Ghost Rider. So this is, people are wondering what in the hell is going on here. It seems like Dr. Octopus has gotten himself a kaiju to help him take over the world. And we are introduced to the sixth member of this all-new murderous Sinister Six, the character of GOG, one of the monster characters from the Marvel Universe. So we see our hero Spider-Man is all by himself facing these villains and these drones and a giant monster. Guns are all pointed in his direction. And he, you know, in true Peter Parker Spider-Man style, he makes a joke by saying, I'll tell you what, let's call the draw. So we are left here at this cliffhanger and wondering what is going to happen to poor Spider-Man now that all of his allies are taken out and he's facing down all these enemies by himself. How is our hero going to survive? We will find out in the next issue. But this is the end for this review and analysis, and I hope you all enjoyed it. Once again, I like this issue a lot. I know it jumps back and forth between the Sinister Six kind of gearing up and Spider-Man and his wife kind of having an argument about her possibly being in a movie where she does nude scenes. But I feel the panel work and the action and the illustrations are done very well. I think that it actually does flow through pretty quickly and pretty easily. And we get a good sense that, you know, the impending doom of the action, and we get a good idea of what's to come in the next issue. We know the next issue is probably going to be very action-packed, but there's a lot of setup in this issue that pays off later on. Everything from Sandman being turned to glass and completely shattered, and the Sinister Six turning on each other, and Spider-Man calling for help and no one kind of answering. All that's going to come up in the very next issue, and I'm very much looking forward to reviewing that with you. You folks can let me know in the comments section how much you enjoyed my review of Spider-Man number 22, part 5 of The Revenge of the Sinister Six, and let me know what you think of this issue if you have it in your collection. Anyway, this is Chris Crazy House signing out. Peace.